Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, we have a defeat to talk about later in the video, but we have a defeat to talk about, which seems strange. We haven't had one yet this season, so yeah, the first loss of the season, and it wasn't very good. It wasn't very good at all. Not that many defeats are, but yeah, it wasn't great at all. But you know what? I'm going to stick that into the later on because I was at Hotspur Way today. Obviously, Antonio Conte's press conference, which was really interesting. It was a longer one than normal, 43 minutes in total. At one point, he kind of turns to his press officer and joked, "We're going for the hour, are we?" Because they normally cut off around the half-hour mark, but this was going past that. But to be fair, it's kind of his fault really, because he was giving these really long and quite insightful answers to a fair few of the questions. But what I would say is, a lot of what he said was not the kind of things I think the fan base really wanted to hear about certain players. Conte is very much his own man, and I'm sure he pays very little attention to what's the current trending topic on Twitter and which players are the current objects of, not objects of, whatever the opposite of objects of affection is. There's a few words out there which I probably can't use, but yeah, it was a really fascinating press conference, and he was very good on those tactical stuff. There was individual stuff. It was everything that you'd hope a Nuno press conference would have been, but wasn't. So let's dive straight into that, because I think there's some good stuff there. I asked him a couple of questions which got some nice kind of interesting answers. I say nice. I don't think, like I say, Twitter, when I put out the quotes, are very happy with them, but we'll get there anyway. Right. First off, injury news. He said, same. I'll give his quotes right here. Yeah, the same. Only Lucas is not available. The other players are all available for the Leicester game. Eric Dyer had literally just that moment as the press conference was starting, it had been announced that he was back in the England squad. So some good stuff about Eric Dyer. Was really proud that he'd got back in there, Conte was, and also said it needs to be the starting point for him now to kind of realise his ambitions. And actually, he was asked a little bit later about Eric Dyer and whether he could play in a 4 as well as he can in a back 3. And actually, I felt that was the most interesting answer. So I'm going to give you that. I'm sorry, there's going to be quite a bit of story time with Alistair in this because, again, I say this a lot. I'd rather you hear Conte saying the things than me paraphrasing them badly, because he's the man. He's the man that's kind of in charge. So yeah, asked about the back 3 and whether he can play in a back 4 for England. He said about Dyer, I think we're talking about a player who has a lot of versatility. He's a player that can play in the centre when you defend with 3 at the back. He can play as a central defender with 4 at the back. But at the same time, he can play as a pivot, as a number 4. You can see during the game also, especially when we're going to build up and we use him and he becomes a midfielder. We're talking about a really good player that, in my opinion, has grown a lot physically, mentally in his mind. And you can see a player that now he knows his capacity. Now he is an important player, but as you know very well, football changes the situation quickly and he has to continue in this right way with humility, to be humble, to continue to work very hard, to continue to have the right ambition, the right desire to be an important player. It's happening like this. For me, for sure, I will push him always, but not only him, I try to push every single player to give more and more and more. And there's interesting stuff there about Dyer. It's kind of just, Dyer's one of these people that, defenders, it kind of does divide opinion. Some, certainly in the media, that do not see what the fuss is about. There's certain fans, of course, exactly the same. But then I just can't see it as any coincidence that every single manager he's had at Spurs essentially has tried to make him an important key figure in the team. They just have. I mean, I guess towards the end of Poch's time, I think he'd had injuries, stuff, and he didn't have appendicitis as well, and he was starting to play a few less games. But under Poch, in his peak years, he was a big player. Mourinho wanted him there in the centre of the back line as well. Nuno as well, and obviously Conte too. So I do think he's a vastly improved player to how he was when he was first finding his way as a central defender. I think there's a lot more to go. I think he can still have moments when he switches off. And I'd like to maybe see him become more of a leader in the back line as well. But yeah, I think it's really interesting kind of the stuff that Conte was saying and how they use him in different ways as well. He was also asked, Son obviously is a hot topic at the moment. There's a real, because obviously with every passing game where Sonny doesn't score a goal, the media, especially national media, will continue to ask, because obviously Conte said in the past, essentially saying he's undroppable, saying that, you'd be crazy to drop him and things like that. And I think the key thing that obviously I think Conte's trying to get across to the media as well as his own players this season is the fact that it's about rotation. It's not dropping this season because the squad is bigger and better and there's more choices. Although we'll talk about that later and whether that is entirely the case in Conte's mind. But with Sonny, I think the key is if he is taken out of the starting lineup, it's not being dropped, it would be being rotated, and he would very likely be straight in the next match again. It's kind of resting him. But he was asked today, is Son, he said, the question was, you've previously said Son is undroppable. Is he still undroppable? And I'll be honest, I can't remember him saying he's undroppable, but I guess by saying you'd be crazy to drop him, I guess it's similar, it's the same thing. And once again, a bit like he was out in Lisbon, he was very, very clear about this. He's definitely going a different direction. He said there are no players that are undroppable. This has to be very clear. There are no players that are undroppable because if I say this is what he means that. If I say this, it's only to try to help my players and try to avoid injuries, to try to have players at the top of their form and to have a good performance. If I am saying this, it is only to protect my players and to give them the possibility to be in every moment at the top. I think he's saying there, if I take them out of the team, if I rest them, if I rotate them, it's because I want them to be at their best and fresh. I think that's what he's trying to say there. Then you know very well that you can play one game well, another you can score, another not. But my task is to try to protect my players and to protect the team, also to find the right way to have a result. Don't forget, sometimes when you don't start with certain players, it means during the game you can have this player with the possibility to use him, as in from the bench. But I repeat, if we want to play these 4 competitions, and especially, I repeat, the Champions League, because it is different to play Europa League or Conference League. And I wonder there whether the Conference League, I think, is referring to Spurs. I do wonder whether he says about Europa League, whether he's just looking down the road a little bit there and saying, don't praise the team for kind of playing Europa League and doing well in the Premier League because you can rotate for both. Although, that's what Inter did a couple of years back when they got to the final of the Europa League as well. But maybe he's just talking of personal experience there. So my first question, I wanted to ask some stuff about right wing back, because I just find it interesting that whatever you make of Emerson, and people know my views on his strong points and his weaker points, but my main point, and this was my question to him, was that you've rotated Sessegnon and Perisic on the left-hand side. He clearly really likes Sessegnon. He'll talk about him again in a bit in the quotes. So I said, you've rotated Sessegnon and Perisic, but not Emerson. He has played, I think someone said maybe started the last 17 games, I think it is, for Spurs. And so I asked him, is that because you're still concerned about Matt Doherty's fitness after his knee injury? To which it was almost like he was going to say something else, but he didn't. Well, he still kind of said something about Doherty as well. He said, I can explain because I like to be honest, not only with you, but first of all my players. In this first part of the 7, I think it's technically 8 games, don't forget we had players like Matthew that had serious injury, and I said in the past that he's struggling a bit to come back to player I knew last season. For sure, now he's improving a lot, and I'm sure that there's the international break. He will have the possibility to have 2 games with the national team, and he will come back, and for sure, I will have the possibility to have another rotation, I think it's option, with him. It was the same with Skippy, because in this period, Skippy was injured with a serious injury. Don't forget, Skippy played his last game in January, maybe December. I think it was January. Another player we have to recover from injury. Then there are players like Richarlison, who went into the team quickly. Longley the same. Perisic was the same. The only player that is struggling a bit with the tactical aspect is Bissouma, but he is also improving a lot in every aspect. I'm sure when we start again and play 12 games, I think it's actually 13, I think it's all right after the international break, for sure, he is another player I can count on. But I want to try to take the best decision for the player because I want to protect the player. At the same time, I want to protect the team and everyone. For sure, we know very well when we start again to play 12 games in 1 month, I think it's 13, you have to be ready. You have to be ready because I need all my players. So, in there, obviously, there's a few things that annoyed the fans in there. I instantly saw on social media. So first off, of course, the fact that he dug out Bissouma a little bit. He did. But I guess you want your manager to be honest. And if he feels that he's not taking on all of the tactical stuff he wants him to know yet, then that's one thing. And he's going to talk about, we've got some more quotes for you about Bissouma in a little bit as well, just to flesh that out a bit more. So I won't go into that right now. And obviously the fans were also annoyed that, again, he completely failed to acknowledge the fact that Jed Spence is a player at the club. But yeah, we'll talk about Jed Spence a little bit later as well. So I pressed a little bit on this because obviously he kind of slightly avoided the question in a way, because however much Doherty is trying to find his level again, it still didn't exactly explain why he's not rotating Emerson at all. So what you got to understand with press conferences, and I think a lot of people wanted me to ask about Emerson and subs like that in the Lisbon press conference. I should really say about the Lisbon press conference, it was very short. They had to get away on a flight, and literally I did the, what did you say to your players, the generic opening question. And I tried to answer another question, but I couldn't get back in there to ask another one because a load of Portuguese journalists, understandably very excited about Sporting win and wanted to ask those questions. So we always knew, I think, that this Thursday one was going to be the one to delve into a little bit deeper. And what I should stress is, if I look on Twitter, if I were to ask Twitter for questions, you know the kind of way they're termed. So they will be termed like, why do you pick Emerson? He's rubbish. Which obviously is not a way I can phrase any kind of question. And I don't think he's rubbish. I just don't think he's a wing-back. So obviously I had to think of a slightly different way to term this to try and get him to talk about Emerson's strengths and weaknesses. So the way I termed it, the way I phrased it was Emerson is not naturally an attacking wing-back like some of those you've worked with in the past, because obviously he's also made wingers into wing-backs. Have you been working with him to try to improve that attacking side of the game? So it's a constructive question, which, he can then delve into Emerson a little bit. And yeah, his answers, let's say, didn't go down very well with Spurs fandom on social media. So his answer, in my opinion, Emerson, he had a good start to the season and he can play in this position, is doing well. In the last game in Sporting Lisbon, he can score 3 goals, not one. He can score 3 goals He didn't. Narrator's voice. He didn't. In every game, he is totally involved. And don't forget, Emerson played every game in this period. For sure, now he can be a bit tired because the wing-back, you can be fatigued because you have to become a striker when you are going to attack and you have to become a defender when we have to defend. But I'm really happy with Emerson's performance because you have to think, compare last season, and he's made a good improvement. He has to continue to work to do it. And at the same time, that we also have even Perisic, who can play on the right or left, and Sessegnon, he is fit and he's in a good moment of form. For sure, maybe he's one of the players that in this moment deserves to play, like Decky, but we'll do it with the right time and the right patience to try to do the best for our team. So there's a lot to take out of that. There's obviously lots of praise for Emerson, which, I think Emerson has put in some good performances this season in a defensive aspect. I think he has. Can't use an aspect now like Conte. I do think that I don't want to go over old ground. You know exactly what I think about Emerson. I just think he's not a wing-back, and he's unfortunately just limits what can happen when you get to a certain point on the right-hand side. His movement's very good, though. That is the thing. That's why he was in those positions, and that's exactly what Conte, funny enough, wants from his wing-backs, is to get in those positions. But I just don't think he has the technical attacking ability to finish off those. And I think that was summed up very well on Tuesday night. But yeah, so that's one element to take from it. He is praising Emerson. It's really fascinating. This is a player who was heading out of the club in the summer. The club were willing to sell, and he's ended up remaining and being the first choice right wing back, which is just how football works, I guess. Other things to take from that. Very clearly said about even Perisic playing on the right, which I thought was quite interesting. It's something that we kind of figured would be the case, that he could play there. But for him to add him there, and I guess if you're also going to say that in a negative way, he's now said about playing Perisic there, Emerson there, Doherty there, Kulusevski there, Lucas there. Jed Spence right at the bottom of the list of 700 people that might be playing on the right wing back slot, just behind Dukesy the Kitman. It's I don't know. I'll be honest. I wouldn't actually mind seeing Ryan Sessegnon on the left, even Perisic on the right. I do actually think that could be very cool. Like I say, and I'm going to talk about it later, I want to see Jed Spence at some point, but what I want is not really important. But I definitely think Sessegnon and Perisic on the same pitch would actually, and on different flanks, would be interesting, because I do feel like Perisic and the quality he's brought to that left-hand side with his crossing, it makes the gulf between what Emerson can't do in an attacking sense even more, an even bigger gulf. I'd be intrigued to see that. So there's that. There's him essentially admitting that Sessegnon and Kulusevski deserve to play, which maybe hints that the two of them will be part of the rotation for Saturday's game against Leicester. Could be. So there was a lot to dig out of that. I was quite pleased with that. It's two questions that got two really decent long answers as well. And then thankfully, because I knew I really wanted to ask mainly about Emerson, and thankfully Charlie from The Athletic, he followed up about the Bissouma part to my first answer. And his question was, you mentioned that Bissouma struggled with the tactical aspect. Has that surprised you for a player who was more expensive than some of the other signings? And you could kind of see Conte bristle a little bit at the thought of anyone claiming that, he was an expensive signing. He's a man who likes money spent on his team. So he's a very quick, expensive. If you compare other midfielders I've seen that other teams spent 60 million, 70 million, 50 million, it depends on the view. I think that we spent the right money. Don't forget that we spent a lot of money on players that now have gone out on loan. He is spot on. That's one thing. If anything proved at Spurs that just splashing cash hasn't worked, just look at the fact that Reguilon, Lo Celso and Ondebele are unknown. I think it's you can splash big cash. That's absolutely fine as long as it's the right deal. I think that's obviously the key thing. We spent a lot of money on players that have now gone out on loan. I do like the fact that he is definitely saying we about things in the past now. And you'll find out later when he talks about, I might have already done it. I might not use that. He spoke about European results last season under Nuno. He said we, even with that. He was actually claiming those results, which no one wants to do. It doesn't matter if you spend money. You need to have players to go into our idea of football. There are players that do this quickly, like Richarlison, Longley, like Perisic, and then other players that need a bit more time. Also, the midfielder is a specific role for us, with the ball and without the ball. It's not simple. I asked for some moments, some positions, they have to be a point of reference in every moment of the game. The midfielder, for sure, to go into our idea of football is maybe the most difficult position, but we're talking about a player, this is Bissouma, that has great skill, good running. With the ball, he's really good. Defensively, he has to pay more attention. More attention because especially we only have two midfielders and then they have to be good with the ball and without the ball. But I'm really happy with his signing. So there's interesting insight there into why Bissouma isn't being rotated as much at the moment. Doesn't seem to be a fitness thing anymore. It seems to be that he wants to be able to trust having two players in there that are going to defensively work incredibly hard as well as going forward. And that's, I guess, Bissouma's a bit of kind of an all-rounder, a bit of a box-to-box player. He just wants him. You'll notice this. If you watch that any time, let's say the wing-backs bomb on, you'll often see Bentancur or Højbjerg will come back in and slot back into their position. And sometimes even when one of the centre-backs do that, one of those two will come back and fit in. And I guess that's the kind of thing he wants Bissouma to be disciplined enough to do that. Look, Bissouma's class. He is he's going to be brilliant at Tottenham. I think he is. He is one of the best Premier League midfielders out there, and he's got very high belief in himself as well. This will come. There's plenty of examples of players who have played for Conte, taken a little while to get used to exactly what he asks of them. His game is about repetition. It's about knowing where everyone else is, almost like automated movements, almost robotic, I guess, in a way. If that player goes there, I know I have to be here. Then I know he's there, I can pass to him. It's all in sync, and when it works, it's fantastic. And it brings lots of goals. We'll talk about that later as well. But with Bissouma, it's just about learning the machinery, I guess, what it exactly entails. And like I said, there's other players that have done it. Perisic is a great example. Perisic didn't even want to be a wing-back. He kind of didn't really take to the idea, went away, came back from Bayern Munich, learnt it, and Conte now calls him one of the best wing-backs in the world. Christian Eriksen, another great example. First, almost a year at Inter under Conte, didn't really get exactly what he wanted. Then the last 6 months was a regular part of that midfield three as they won the title. It would just click for him. Obviously, he's, while I was away, his full debut, wasn't it? It was against West Ham. It wasn't great. He didn't help himself by Bissouma by getting himself that early yellow card for chucking the ball on the floor. So that hampered him a bit. But yeah, it's just a case of, him being trusted, I guess, by Conte. And that kind of leads into this next question as well, which is an interesting one tactically as well. Because Charlie followed that up by saying, have you ever considered playing with a 3 in midfield? Presumably because maybe you could then play Bissouma there and it would free him with some of that responsibility. And so he says, I think we tried to sign a player with the characteristics to play in a 2. I think he's talking about Bissouma there. Then it happens during the game when sometimes we were winning to play with the 3 midfielders. In the past, I've played with 2 strikers and 3 midfielders, but in this team, when you have players like Sonny, Richarlison, Kulusevski and Kane, I think the best system we can play with is with 2 midfielders. We need only a little bit of time to work. We need only a bit of time to work with Bissouma for him to understand and to understand well. Now we have 2 reliable, important players in Højbjerg, who for me made important progress, and now I think he's a really strong player. The same for Bentancur. Don't forget Skippy as well, who is really young. We're talking about a prospect, but for me, Skippy's always been reliable, and for this reason, I count on him. It has to be very clear, because for me, Skippy is an important player as a midfielder. Also, he gives me the opportunity to make rotation. For sure, in the next 12 games, 13 games, he can have a better physical condition, and I can count on him also, Bissouma and Matthew. We need all the players in the squad because we have every game is massive. For this reason, we need to have energy. If we think we have to play with the same players, we're not going to have good results. So yeah, I think it's the Conte's gradual process of getting these players to exactly where he wants to be. It's incredibly frustrating for fans. It's frustrating when you look at the subs and him not making subs, because I don't think fitness-wise, as a sub coming in later in the game, I don't see what difference that makes. But I guess if he's saying that if a game's tight and he still doesn't entirely trust Bissouma to do the exact role, because this is the other side to it, I guess, is that we know Bissouma's a terrific player, is an absolutely fantastic player. But if his system is very much, reliant on all of its parts working a certain way, like a machine, I guess, all the gears turning in the right way. If one of them, however good he is doing something different, then maybe the machine doesn't work properly. I'm guessing that's the Conte way. So yeah, it was a really interesting press conference. There's more stuff to come from the embargoed sections, which will be for tomorrow. So that'll be Friday if you're watching this. So keep an eye out for that. People often ask me, like, what's the embargo section? What's the point of that? So it's a separate part of the press conference. The first bit's called the broadcast section, which is the bigger section, where all the TV cameras are on and everything. That's normally where I ask my questions as well. And then the written embargo section is for the national journalists. You'll have the Evening Standard. Well, as long as it's not a Friday press conference, we'll often get a couple of questions, which will then, for their paper, which then goes out online at 12 o'clock the day after. And then the daily journalists get their questions, which go for 10:30 p.m. If it's a Thursday press conference, it'll be the Friday night. And if it's a Friday press conference, it'll be the same day on a Friday night. And if it's Tuesday press conference before a midweek game, then it'll be the Tuesday night. You don't have them in European. European press conferences, pre-match press conferences don't have an embargo section. And the reason behind it, I think it's just an old school thing of where the print newspapers, just kind of trying to protect and have their own stories that most people will see first in their newspapers the next day. Because obviously we're living in an online world, so a lot of people will see them online at 10:30 at night, but probably the bulk of people maybe won't see them until the morning. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, I'm a man that used to work in print. I was in print for a long time. And so I understand the need to try and preserve it, because it's, with the advent of technology and more people using tablets, their phones, everything to get their news, I can understand trying to find ways of keeping little things to make the paper product more important and more, I guess, worth the value of spending money on. But yeah, there's people like me nowadays. I obviously live in the digital world, so everything I write goes online. It doesn't bother me. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of having a story buried at 10:30 at night online, and I do think eventually that will probably get earlier and earlier and earlier. But I think especially coming with Spurs fans as an example, I think it's such an international audience now that a fair few people are still up at 10:30, and I think a lot of people have got into the habit of looking for a 10:30 line as well. But also people in other continents, the likes of America and Asia and all that. Asia is the other way, isn't it? I'm trying to think time-wise. And for America, definitely 10:30 is just obviously in their late afternoon, evening for most of the country. So yeah, it probably isn't as big a deal as I'm thinking it is in my head, buried away at 10:30. But yeah, so that's it. That's just a purely an answer. A lot of people have kind of asked why embargo sections, what does it mean, and why is the press conference split up? It used to be that the TV cameras had to be switched off for the written embargo section, but it seems to have been they've started in some instances to be recorded. There's two sides to that. I do agree. I think it's nice for you guys to see as much as you can in a video form. The other thing I would say, I don't know whether you're going to get as good answers. That's my only thing about it, because what we used to do, the written section used to be that we would go up and just kind of huddle around the main desk. Obviously, COVID would have definitely put the end to that, or maybe even temporarily. But what we used to do is we'd go up and we'd all huddle around the desk. The cameras would be switched off. The manager was far more laid back. I mean, Poch used to lean back on his seat to the point that once, I remember, he almost fell off it. He was so far leaning back. And they're very relaxed. And when they're like that, you get a lot better stuff, obviously, because they're not on camera. And if there were to be something that they said that they realise afterwards, I probably shouldn't have said that, then they can go to the press officer and say, look, is there any chance that we could probably take that out, because he didn't really mean it in that way, but he kind of said it in the moment, because there's no camera footage and all that sort of stuff. So it's a way of them feeling a little bit more comfortable, I guess, with what they're coming out with. And it did lead to good answers. You'd get some really good written sections. Whereas now, I think on the whole, the broadcast section probably gets more of the better stuff. But there are instances where there's some really good stuff in the written sections. Like, stuff for tomorrow's quite interesting as well. Obviously, I can't say it because I don't want to break any embargoes. But yeah, I think personally, I think if it ended up not being televised, I think anyone in the world, if you have a camera shoved in your face, you're probably not going to be as forthcoming and as calm and laid back as you normally would be. And yes, I know I'm doing this while speaking into a camera, but it's just me sitting on a sofa. It's not exactly the most high pressure environment ever. So that was a press conference. It was a good one. It was an interesting one, and it was back. It was like Poch used to speak for 45 minutes or so. It was very unlike Conte, and like I said, I don't think he was delighted to do so, but his answers were really long and interesting, so maybe he did. And it was kind of segueing nicely into Lisbon. It was a very different press conference to the one we had after, because he was very calm afterwards, but it was very bland, and it was very one of those where, a draw was a fair result, but we ended up losing. I don't know why he's speaking like a country English gent. But yeah, it was a weird one, and it totally it betrayed what his real feelings were, because I know he was furious. I spoke to a lot of people that were kind of behind the scenes after the final whistle, and he was fuming, absolutely fuming in the corridors after the game, and I think from what I can understand, he did that thing that he's done before where he just doesn't go and talk to the players. He's so angry with them, he just lets them stew. I think Kulusevski even came out when he was coming through the mix zone and said he hadn't seen Conte after the final whistle. And it's it's not just something Conte does. Other managers do that sometimes, and just essentially saying, "You were so bad, you sit there and think about what you've done." It's like putting them on the naughty step or something. And yeah, well, we'll see whether it does its job or not on Saturday. But yeah, like I said earlier, it was a short, sharp press conference, all done so they could fly off. And that flight, from what I understand, was near silent. Look, they're not going to be standing up doing the conga up and down the plane. Of course they're not. They've lost a game. But there was a real feeling of, we messed up kind of thing. And there was barely even like a hushed voice in the background. They were just all on there. Some of them may well have been asleep. It was obviously they went off straight after the game. And they went back. And I think there was a bit of a fear among some of the players that he would drag them into very early training the next day, because they were staying over at the lodge when they flew back. I think it was presumably into Stansted. And yeah, staying at the lodge overnight. And he didn't. He started training at 11 a.m. the next day on the Wednesday. But there are suggestions that normally after European games he does afternoon training and lets them have the morning off. So perhaps that was the punishment. No, you're starting at 11 kind of thing. Yeah, it's one of those where, look, I think he's right to be upset with his players in some regards, because there were some poor performances out there. I think only Hugo Lloris and Ivan Perisic came out with any credit, really, for me. Hugo made some incredible saves. The one that really was a disgrace that the resulting corner led to a goal, because it was an incredible save. Full length, wrong hand. His save from Marcus Edwards when he ran through was terrific as well. It's one of those where it looks like it's run of the mill, but it's really not. It was a brilliant reaction save, kind of underneath him. He gets his arm underneath, and he made one in the first half that was full length save as well. So yeah, he's him and Perisic, I felt, were the only ones that really deserved to come out with any credit. And the late collapse, that was a little bit embarrassing. That was a bit like Spurs of old, when they're just like, "Oh, we've lost," and you just saw players switching off. However, I don't think he should really get away scot-free himself, Conte. He between him and Amorim, the sporting boss, the home manager, head coach, won the battle of the dugouts for me. He made 2 subs. He made a few subs. I think he made 4 subs. 2 of those substitutes scored goals. And obviously Conte, subs are definitely the little bit of the gripe right now, aren't they? Just made the one. It just seems to be the go-to substitution, doesn't it? It's always... So one of the 4 attacking players who is left out will be on the bench. They will be the one that comes on around the 60 to 70 mark. And then he looks at it. This is what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It worries me slightly that it's almost like he's looking at that bench and still doesn't trust it. I mean, you've heard some of the quotes from today, and there clearly is players that he doesn't trust yet. But, I don't get that. I know if Lucas was fit, I'm sure Lucas would come off the bench as well. He obviously finds him quite reliable. But it's like Brian Hill's on there. Doesn't even exist. He could just he's like a ghost. He could just go up behind people and the movie Ghost, he could just go around them, pushing random objects around them, and they just think they fell off themselves. So yeah, there's Brian Hill, who just essentially is there, is almost like a mascot. Harvey White was actually on the bench as well. Yet to see Harvey White actually play. and as in not I am. I've seen him play a lot of academy games, and he was obviously on loan at Portsmouth as well. But we're yet to see him get any minutes whatsoever. I think it's going to be a very frustrating season for him unless in January they let him go somewhere on loan. But yeah, sorry. In Maine, talking about those subs as well, it's like Bissouma, obviously. Surely, you can bring on Bissouma, as even if it is a third midfielder for that. Skippy, he clearly says it's more of a fitness thing with Skip. So why can't, if he feels like the midfield's running out of energy, why can't you swap one of those two over with Skip for the last half hour or so? He's got more than enough fitness to play half an hour. Or even more, crucially, mix up the wing-backs. You've got Matt Doherty there. If Emerson isn't producing on the right-hand side and he's wasted 3 chances, get Matt Doherty in there. Get Jed Spence in there. There was one point where it was right before they scored their first goal. Matt Doherty and Ryan Sessegnon, Conte yelled at them to get back from their warm-ups. Got them onto the sideline. Was about to bring them on. Sporting scored Paulinho's header and he sent them both back to the dugout. And I don't understand what changed. I know they scored, but what changed? You were still chasing the goal. And those are 2 players that will bring fresh energy and attacking impetus down the flanks. I don't get it. Still bring them on. But there you go. I'm not the manager. It was just a funny game. It was one that was there to be won. I think Sporting was slightly surprised at how Spurs attacked the game. Even in the press conference the previous day, Amorim and Trincao were both kind of saying we expect Spurs to give us a lot of the ball and then counter-attack. But it wasn't really like that. Spurs' possession will show Sporting had more of it, but I feel Sporting, when they had a possession, it was more around their own half and box. Whereas I felt Spurs dominated more of the possession in the attack in the opposition half. Stats may not bear that out, but that seemed to be the view from the rest of the press as well. And I felt they started the game quite brightly, pushed hard the pitch. I felt the second half they started quite brightly and created chances, but it just didn't do enough. Just didn't do enough at all. And it was a game where I felt they should have won. They created enough chances, but they were just, Emerson obviously had the 3 chances. Kane had a shot that was parried as well. Richarlison had a couple of opportunities, obviously a couple of offside calls that he just didn't quite read the run right. But you know what? It's at the end of the day, they lost to a team who are good technically and they had some nice bright moves that they put together, but ultimately they're 7th in the Portuguese league. There's enough quality in that starting lineup to go out there and do the job. And that's where I think, yes, Conte made some kind of decisions that you'd have maybe like to see him do different things, but ultimately that team still has enough quality out there. Players underperformed for me. 11v11, that's a stronger team. It's essentially what Amorim said before the game, the day before. He said if Spurs play with the quality that those players do possess, we don't have a chance. We've got to hope that they don't, and they didn't. And I think Spurs and Conte's Champions League record and Spurs' recent European record away from home, my goodness. So that Sporting loss added to defeat on the road last season in the Conference League against Mura under Conte, but also under Nuno, Vitesse, Pesos de Ferreira, and there's a draw at Rennes. I'm trying to think if they even... I think the last time they would have won in Europe away, would that have been Jose? That would have been under Jose. That's how far back we're going. But even under Jose, they lost at Royal Antwerp away. I remember that as well. God, he was so annoyed at that one. And of course, the absolutely embarrassing, crushing 3-0 defeat at Dinamo Zagreb, which, 2-0 up. First leg, chucking that away. So yeah, something about Spurs away in Europe, bearing in mind how good they were in the Poch years, especially, the results they would dig out away from home. It's definitely an issue. It's really, really not good at all. And even Conte, his Champions League record is so poor for a manager as good as him. This is a guy that's won 5 domestic league titles and various domestic cups, and he clearly is one of the world's best coaches. But for some reason, the Champions League is his Achilles heel. I was looking up the stats just to see, because I looked up a stat, I think, last season about it, and I just wanted to double check it. So I looked back. In his last 17 matches in the Champions League, he's only won 4 matches. Go back even further than that, and he's won just 8 of his 28 matches in the competition. His past 28 matches in the competition. It's crazy, isn't it? Someone that good. It just seems to be a real thing. Some have questioned, I know, whether he focuses so much on winning domestic titles. Is he that bothered about European stuff? I don't think that's the case. Certainly not the way he talks about the Champions League. Some people have suggested that his physical demands that places on his teams are so high that 2 games a week, it's difficult for them and the preparation time to be ready for 2 games within a couple of days, or 3 in a week, I guess you could say. I don't know about that, you see, because obviously, like I said earlier, 2 years ago, he reached the final of the Europa League while also winning Serie A. So I don't think that's the case. I don't think it is, but there's clearly something there that he just has a block on. I'm sure there's context to it. I mean, I was told that because the furthest he's got in the Champions League was once he got to the quarter-finals as a manager with Juventus back in 2013. I should stress he won it as a player. He did win it as a player with Juventus, but as a manager, 2013 when they lost 4-0 on aggregate to Bayern Munich. And some people have said that Juventus team was very much a rebuilding team going through a big rebuild. Although I would stress that was a team that was winning Serie A. Although maybe that suggests the level of Serie A wasn't that great at the time. I don't know if a team in rebuild wasn't doing that well. But I just can't imagine any Conte team being that bad or anything. So I don't get it. I don't get why they've. I think particularly at Inter, they really struggled. Did they only get 6 points? I can't remember. I feel like when he was at Inter, they didn't have a great time in the Champions League at all. But the thing is, as well, is that Spurs team the other night has a lot of European experience. That was Eric Dyer's 50th European experience, 50th European appearance. All the other players, a lot of those players have played in a Champions League final as well. These are not guys that were just rocked up in the competition. I think that was a little thing that I think some fans found a bit galling, and I didn't really buy into. Was he was saying after the game, Sporting Lisbon, they're a team that play in the Champions League every year. They know exactly what they're doing. I just kind of thought, your whole team. I was trying to think of anyone in there that hadn't played Champions League football. Maybe Emerson. I'm trying to think if Emerson had or not. Who else? I think everyone else had at their various clubs. I'm sure one of you will tell me if there's anyone that I've missed out there. It's Højbjerg, probably a Bayern, surely it would have done as well. So there's a lot of experience there. And like I say, on the day it was the 2 33-year-old Perisic, 35-year-old Lloris, who were the best by a mile for me above anyone else. But I do think a lot of the issues came from the inability of the front 3 to click. It's very early days, so I don't want to go too overboard on it. But I'm going to very closely watch to see whether the Richarlison, Kane, Son as a trio works. My gut feeling, and again, this is very early days, so it could prove to be very different. So I'm very aware it's a very weird light here, because I'm doing this just in the evening, and I seem to be very bright on the screen, so apologies for that. But I do wonder whether Son and Richarlison are too similar in the way they play. For me, look, I'm a big Dejan Kulusevski fan. I think he's superb. And I think the key thing with him is that he offers something different to the rest of the front 3 that we saw on Tuesday night. Because Son and Richarlison are very direct players, very skillful. They will head straight towards that goal. I think Kulusevski has that, but he's probably less of a striker like those two can be, or forward, whatever you want to call it. And he's more of a creative playmaker type. He will look to cut in and cross the ball. He will look to, essentially, I think more of his focus is on setting up goals for others. He said to me, didn't I? I said that out in Israel, wasn't it? He said that he sees himself as a number 10. That's his favourite position. But obviously, he's got a lot of joy on the right, so he's very happy to keep playing there. I just feel, this is my personal opinion, I feel Spurs are a better team when Kulusevski's in it. I feel he's got that little bit of magic, a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of an ability to pick a lock. Whether it be a cross, whether it be a quick break with that strength he's got to dribble up the pitch and then put one of the other players away. I just feel if you're going to play with Son and Richarlison either side of Kane, you lose something. But it's early days. It may be that all three of those, we're talking in a couple of weeks' time of how those three have clicked and they find a way to absolutely be superb together. I just think he's really unlucky because, Conte's spoken about rotation and all of this, how he's got these four great options. Obviously, Lucas is out and Brian Hill doesn't exist. But if you're leaving someone out 3 games in a row, that's not rotation. That's just being dropped. And I don't get why Kulusevski was dropped if that's the case, because I feel like he's contributed so much. I was looking up his stats as well. First 24 Premier League matches this season, last 16 goal involvements in those 24 games. That's 10 assists, 6 goals, and that's not even to mention his involvement in earlier in the moves for goals as well. So yeah, I just feel like even when he's come off the bench, he's made Spurs look better. Even on Tuesday night, he immediately took the ball, went down the right, got past his man, got fouled. Man got a yellow card. They got a dangerous free kick on the edge of the penalty area. And then moments later, he was crossing in a ball that Richarlison headed wide when he really should have got a shot on goal. I just think he's only 22 years old, but I think he's a big player for Spurs now. And I personally wouldn't have him anywhere near that bench. I think he needs to be playing. Obviously, yes, we've got to rotate, but I do feel like it shouldn't be his turn again for a long time. Yeah, I mean, look, Son and Kane, both I felt were out of sorts on Tuesday night. Obviously, much has been made of Sonny not scoring yet. He's only got the 1 assist on the first game of the season. But from what I could tell watching on from America, he looked to be good against Fulham. I thought he was bright in that game. Not so great against Marseille, but then not many were. And I just feel Kane in the last couple of games, it's just, look, he's still having his moments. Like I say, 2 perfect balls to Emerson that would have been goals probably had it been any other player or an attacking player on the edge of that, on the end of that. But yeah, I think you miss Richarlison and Son can only really flourish when Kane is dropping deep and playing brilliant balls over the top for them to run onto. That's when that 3 will probably work. But if Kane is not really in full flow, then it becomes a very lumbering front 3. I mean, Richarlison certainly worked hard. He fashioned chances for himself. Like I say, rounded the keeper really well and put the ball in the goal, but unfortunately was offside, quite a way offside. But yeah, it's a 3. I don't know. Again, I must stress it's really early before I get people going, I don't know, I'll get some aggregator account saying, as to goal states, this 3 cannot play together. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying on the early evidence, they haven't clicked yet. They haven't found that way of combining as a trio, whereas I feel like Kulusevski does. He makes it all tick. Yeah, it's not saying it's perfect in every game. There's been a couple of games where he's been quiet, but I think on the whole, it just gives you that something extra. And yeah, so it's a funny one because Kane scored 5 in 5 in the Premier League. He's doing, he's scoring the goals. But I wouldn't say I've been blown away. He's had a couple of games where you've thought, oh, he's been good in that. But I'd say overall, I don't think he's hit the heights we know he can hit yet. And Champions League especially, which is a competition he's been desperate to get back into, I don't feel he's taken either game thus far by the scruff of the neck. And I think he's a good enough player to do that as well, which I think is even more frustrating. You get some strikers who they just rely on service. And if they have a bad game, sometimes it can also be down to the ball being put into them. But I don't think that can be levelled at Kane for this, because I think he's so much more than just a striker. He is a number 10 and a number 9 all rolled into one. So if a game, the service isn't coming his way, he can come back and really make an impact. I just think the quality of some of his passing hasn't been to the standard of the balls to the likes of Emerson Tuesday. I'm losing time. Probably still got jet lag. And then there's the right. There is the right-hand side. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to go into Emerson, really. I don't want to dig into him. I think enough people are doing that on social media. I don't want to add to that. You know my thoughts. The moves kind of end up stopping on the right. What I would say about Emerson as well, is apart from that he's got really good movement in getting into good attacking positions when the ball's on the other side, is I also feel he probably works better with Kulusevski. Because when he's with Kulusevski, it's almost like he just, the old T-shirts kind of keep, like Berbatov, you say, keep calm and give the ball to me kind of thing. I kind of feel that's what he does with Kulusevski. He just goes, there you go, mate, have the ball. You can do it. I know what you can do. And so you'll often find that even when Emerson gets quite advanced when he's playing with Kulusevski, he will just play a simple pull-back ball to Kulusevski to then cut inside and do what he does. Whereas maybe when Kulusevski's not there, Emerson feels he has to try and create, and it's just not his game. It's not his fault. This is what I think I find sad about the fact that he is getting abuse on Twitter as well, is that he's a player. He is a round peg being tried to fit into a square hole. He's a good fullback. Although I would say on Tuesday, the one thing I constantly praise him for is often his defending. His defending was not great on Tuesday. The first goal, he was him and Kane were Paulinho got above them to head in. And in the second one, he and Romero just switched off. They were the two, and he just got nutmegged so easily for Arthur to score. And so, yeah, defensively, sorry, Emerson, I can't back you up on that. But it's just really difficult when you have a system that relies on attacking wing-backs kind of really feeding the front three. This is the thing. I know people get annoyed that Conte's system, when he plays with a two, has more workhorsey type midfielders. As he was saying earlier when he was talking about Bissouma, Højbjerg and Bentancur, of course, both have got their attacking qualities. Højbjerg's really, I think, has increased his output attacking-wise this season. Bentancur is obviously a silky kind of Rolls-Royce type player. Both of them work incredibly hard, and they're probably not as much known for their attacking abilities. And so in a Conte system, that is because you have like that around them. So that's the two wing-backs and the three in front. They're the ones that create chances. They're the ones that kind of do the work. And that is 5 players in a team. Kind of, obviously the wing-backs also have this defender. It's a knackering position. But ultimately, if they are able to fly forward and create that, you'll see a better kind of Spurs team. So, yeah. Old Emerson. It's if he's not going to rotate, then Emerson is going to keep getting put in the firing line. And I hope if he does start on Saturday against Leicester, I'd love it if he put in a beautiful cross which someone headed in, or he gets into the box at the back post and heads in. But it almost feels unfair at times. I think for matches against the likes of Man City, Liverpool, teams like that, when they play him, I think he's really good for that. A deeper sitting, kind of almost like another fullback or a fullback rather than a wingback. But I just feel when you're playing the likes of, Sporting on a Tuesday night, I think you could have a natural wingback. Jed Spence exists. What else did I want to talk about as well? Marcus Edwards. Marcus Edwards, who I used to write so much about because he's such a talented young player. It was one of those kind of really split kind of feelings where I was really happy to see Marcus Edwards playing so well and fulfilling his potential, but I was also really sad because it wasn't in a Spurs shirt, and that was it was really kind of almost difficult to watch in that. He was probably one of Sporting's best players on the day. He went on an incredible run where he did a 1-2 at the end of it, and that was the one where Lloris made that really good reaction save. Would have been one of the goals of the competition had it gone in. His dribbling skills are still fantastic, and he's far more disciplined out there than I remember seeing him as an academy player. He's come on and develops a lot. And yeah, it was quite interesting that Amorim afterwards, he still said that he still made a point that his training could still be a bit more focused. But he's come on leaps and bounds. Actually, he tipped him for a future England player as well. If you're not aware of the story of Marcus Edwards, way back when he was 17 years old, he was like the golden boy of the Tottenham Academy. Poch made an ill-fated comparison with a young Lionel Messi. Said he had some of the traits of it, and then his press officer Simon Felstein at the time just did a face of like, oh, what have you just said? And he like quickly went, oh, or Eric Lamela, and it was like, you've already said Messi now, that's out there. And it just didn't go well for him. He had an ankle injury, he had his tonsils removed, and just behind the scenes there were some little issues, and his behaviour, Poch would allude to his behavioural issues, and even Marcus admitted in an interview a couple of years later that, he wasn't the best. I'm trying to remember the exact quote, but essentially saying, he was quite difficult. I think that was the way he put it, quite difficult in the academy. Went on a Norwich loan that really didn't work very well for him. Didn't get on well there, and they kind of cut that quite short and weren't particularly complimentary about him. There's some kind of reports about timekeeping and things like that. But then he went to Excelsior, Excelsior Rotterdam, I think it was, in the Dutch league. And after a little while there, he took a little time to settle there, adapt to a different country, a bit homesick away from everyone. But then in the second half of that loan, he really flourished, and they loved him. His teammates really took to him as well. And that set up quite nicely. He came back to Spurs. I think he went on a trial with Brentford, was training with them, but a move didn't come through. And then Spurs did a deal with Vitória, which was pretty much for nothing, but it had a 50% sell-on clause. Did very well at Vitória as well. Again, took time to settle into Portuguese life. And then, was it January last year, I think it was, Sporting came calling. And they bought him, and that 50% sell-on clause actually went with him. Spurs, I think, agreed to not take it there, and it became part of the deal where Spurs would get 50% of probably a bigger one, because I think he's got a £52 million release clause now at Sporting. I think as part of the deal, I remember reading on Vitória's website that they get 10% of whatever Spurs will eventually make of him. So I'm trying to think, does that make it 45% technically Spurs would get of any future fee? But either way, they will get a lot of money if he continues to develop. And there may be a question at some point, do they buy him back? Value-wise, does it become a good deal to buy him back because you're getting him for almost half price? But we've got to see. There's a long way to go. He's got to keep his head down. He's got to focus. I'm delighted to see it because he is one of the most talented young players I ever have seen play on a football pitch in academy games. But yeah, he had some ways about him. He was, what did I write? I watched him play. It was a game where I think he expected to be in the Carabao Cup team that Poch, or whatever the League Cup was called at that point, that Poch was about to pick, and he wasn't. And he went out to play with under-21s. I just kind of felt like he was sulking. He didn't really play particularly well. And I wrote in my report that I felt that he hadn't reacted particularly well. And literally later that day I saw I was blocked. He'd blocked me on Twitter. And then, to be fair, it didn't remain for long. He unblocked me not too long after. But it was nothing personal. It was just seeing out there. He wasn't really passing to people. He was trying to just do everything himself, dribble. Wasn't really tracking back. That was something that used to kind of wind up, I think, his academy coaches a bit. But I just think it's fantastic. I'm so happy to see him it's a part of growing up. We're all not our finished selves when we're teenagers and everything. So to see him kind of coming along as he is and being talked of as a future England international. I asked Eric Dyer about him as well, and he was very complimentary because he keeps an eye on sport in his old team as well. And Laurie said some good stuff about him as well. So, yeah, I think it's lovely to see him coming along and cracking on, really, and just getting to where he needs to be. I'm trying to think what else I was going to talk about, really. Jed Spence. I could talk about Jed Spence until the cows come home. Because I just feel... I'd hope that Conte's not being stubborn about it, and that it is more that there's something in training he hasn't quite seen yet, and that he just feels he still needs more work. And it may be like Bissouma, he's not taking on the tactical elements that he wants as well. I just get this feeling that if he were to give him a chance, he would be surprised. Because I've said it a million times, he was very much bought as a player for Conte. He ticks every single box, really does, for a Conte player. So, yeah, give him a chance, Antonio, because I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. And I think it'll be one of those maybe awkward moments where a player that he's kind of made his big thing, he's a club signing. I didn't sign him, but he'll be good, I reckon. I think if he lets him play, and he just, even in a game like that on Tuesday night, chuck him on for the last 20 minutes. He's a guy that is known for his attacking kind of wing-back play. Get him on there, give him a chance. But there you go, honestly. Because I think this is it for me. I think there's this thing that's kind of now going out because some of the games have been a little bit turgid at times. That, Conte football's dull football. It's not. It's not. Spurs have, I don't know if it still is the case, but they'd scored more goals than anyone else in 2022. It's not dull football. What the key is his system only functions properly with the right people in each position. Like I say, round pegs for round holes. So do it. Do it. And I do think if you have a functioning right-hand side as well as a left-hand side, and you have your three forwards working well together, whether that means Kulusevski comes in or not, that's how you do it. That's how it works. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully we'll see him be interesting to see what his lineup is. He said he will rotate for Saturday's game against Leicester, so I'm hoping to see a few changes. And Leicester have been in a bad way, but they can still pose a threat. They always do. Got a few players that always seem to do well against Spurs, obviously Vardy being one of them. They are bottom, and they're not looking great at the moment, but at some point you always feel there's going to be a kickback. And that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they booed, was it against Wolves at half-time? And I have no doubt that if the first half is not great against Leicester, they will do the same again. So I think there needs to be a strong start. And I think the moment you do that, if they could get an early goal, I think the confidence suddenly courses through them. And it could end up going the other way. They could score a lot of goals, and that could be exactly what they need, because Wolves take a point or more from Man City and Spurs win. Spurs finished the day on Saturday in top place in the Premier League. I know it's very early days, but suddenly kind of all this being concerned about, let's admit it, the first defeat of the season could be a little bit of a different scenario, although I'm sure in the next defeat we'd say it's only Leicester. But there you go. That's the way football works. Right, I've got to head off because I've actually got to go out. So I'm going to head off now. Hopefully this uploads quickly. I'm filming it late at night, so sometimes when it's late at night it doesn't go very quickly, and it may end up coming out tomorrow morning. So I apologise if all of this sounds a bit weird when I'm talking about now and it's actually tomorrow morning for you, but there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. Obviously, the match on Saturday evening. I should hopefully be able to do a video on Sunday, taking my youngest to university for the first time, which is going to be an emotional day for everyone involved. But hopefully, if I don't, hopefully I'll still be able to do a video later in the day when I get back. Probably be quite sad, but there you go. It's going to be strange. But yeah, time to head off. And as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.